Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live chat today with author Mike Bond. His latest thriller, Holy War, is based on Bond's own experiences in Lebanon, Syria, and the Middle East. Mike has been called one of the 21st century's most exciting authors, and the book has been praised for its portrayal of battle and its journalistic and political realism. Thanks for joining us today, Mike. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I enjoyed it very much.
I also wanted to tell our viewers about some special pricing and promotions. We want to remind everyone to stop by BookTrib after the live chat. They can enter to win a hard copy of Holy War. And for those people who prefer e-copies, we also have a special pricing. You can enjoy Holy War in ebook format provided by Bookshout, and it's at a special discount of 99 cents for BookTrib members. This discount is available for a limited time. You can access this on your ebook on the web from your smartphone or your tablet. And for a direct link, you can text Holy War in all caps to 67076. And just remember, texting is within US only. So now that we have all that out of the way, we'll get to the good stuff. So, Mike, before we begin the questions, can you tell us a little bit about Holy War?
Sure, Amanda. It came out of my experiences in the Middle East, which began really when I was 19 at the end of the Algerian Revolution, though Algeria is not really in the Middle East. And after that, the 6 Days War and other wars between Israel and its Palestinian or other neighbors, Arab neighbors. And then I had lived in Beirut as a very young man, and I found it to be the most incredibly beautiful place in the world. I loved it. It was kind of like the Paris, as they said, of the Middle East. And so it was just fantastic. You could, I was young and at that point, and you could party all night and get up at dawn and swim in the morning and get on your motorcycle and an hour later be up in the mountains skiing if that was your predilection. But and then you could party all night. And that even though it was partially an Islamic country, it was very wild, very open, very free, and it was kind of like the hippie years before they were at the same time. And I lived at that point in the Souk, S-O-U-K, which is an area that had first been built by the Phoenicians, and very beautiful, ancient buildings. And so then when the war came, which basically came when the Palestinians moved in, brought war with them,
Mhm.
I went back many times for a number of reasons and saw the ongoing destruction of Beirut and of Lebanon and the outcome. And I thought it would make a good book a good love story, because wars are really about love.
Yeah.
And a good love story because a good war story, love story, both. And at the same time, I wanted to remind the world what we'd lost in Lebanon and in Syria too. Syria is in the book as well, which is the site, as we all know, of a horrible tragedy right now. So that, in a nutshell, kind of is what what the genesis of Holy War was. And as I say in the front to the book, I say, having covered wars on 3 continents, I
Mhm.
I really feel we have to find a way to evolve beyond war. And that's
Yeah.
also what I wrote the book about, so everybody could understand what was going on in this endless conflict over there.
It's
But it's
fascinating,
also
though.
supposed to be a very exciting read. So anyway.
That's what they say. Um, we have a question from Jake. He wants to know, how has your career as a war and human rights correspondent influenced Holy War and the writing of the book?
I'm not sure I got all of that. How did my career as a war correspondent influence the writing?
Yeah, how has your career as a war and human rights correspondent influence the book?
Well, that's a very good question. I would say that when you're in the middle of it, when you're in the middle of a war or a widespread human rights violence, as I have been, uh, you live so deeply and you're so aware of it and you're so aware how horrible it is that it really drove me to write a book which put my readers there so they could understand. And that's what people say about this, the book, is that they feel they're there. And it's multiple love stories as well as multiple stories of sorrow and fear. It's just war. And I wanted people who've never been in war, never been in an urban civil war, I wanted them to understand. And we writers, we're trying to portray experience, because every reader, when you read, and this happens to me, I read books constantly, and every time I read something, I gain experience, and I learn something more as if I had been there. And that's what I want to give my readers. So sorry to give you such a long, convoluted answer, but
No,
that's it. If I hadn't
answer.
been there as a correspondent and written about it factually, I couldn't have written about it factually in the novel, which it is factual.
Absolutely. Jerry has an interesting question. He says, you led a panel at Thriller Fest this year on whether thrillers are the literature of revolution or liberation. And he wants to know, did the panel come to a conclusion on this?
No, I think it more or less ended up as a little podium for each of the folks involved to talk about his, and we didn't have any women writers up there, which was something to be deplored. But in any case, it was more or less everyone kind of trying to explore his own vision of what a book should be. And I think we all agreed on a couple of things. We agreed that genres are a stupid idea, and that there's no difference between one genre and another. It's all literature, and the biggest thriller ever written is probably the Bible, and the best thriller. And there's even a good nonfiction book is a thriller. It keeps you going to find out where you're going, and it teaches you. So we learned that we did get that in common, and we also got in common that it's possible to raise human awareness through the writing of thrillers to make the world a better place, in a nutshell.
Excellent. Teresa kind of has a question that kind of stems off of that. She says, and maybe you didn't come to a conclusion, but she says, where do you think Holy War stands on that topic? Literature of revolution or liberation, or neither? Does it not fall under either of those?
That's a darn good question. It's both. My feeling is, having been in numerous revolutions, that they always fail. They always result in more bloodshed than the previous situation. I think Arab Spring is a perfect example, where every country involved in Arab Spring is much worse off than it was before, from Tunisia all the way to Syria. I mean, Syria started as an Arab Spring uprising, and it was very peaceful. So revolution to begin with, non-peaceful revolution is always tragic. And secondly, as far as liberation, yes, liberation is very important to me, because, and when I write my books, I try to pass on to my readers the importance of personal liberation, that every single person should seek her or his deeper life, because life is so short, it goes so fast. And if you don't love deeply and honestly and live deeply and honestly, at the end, you've been robbed. You've robbed yourself. So, and I feel particularly, because a lot of my books are about Islamic culture, that it's essential that Islamic women be liberated, because they are entirely imprisoned in this hideous medieval doctrine that we just have to end. It's beyond disgraceful. So that's part of liberation. If I can help to liberate the Muslim women of the world, I'll have succeeded in my life.
Excellent answer. We have a couple questions just about the writing process. So Sasha wants to know, do you write and see where your stories take you, or do you have to sit down with an outline when writing a book?
Oh gosh, no, I found out what's happening at the same time as the reader does, in the sense that all of my stories come deeply out of my own experience and of my subconscious experience. And I will occasionally do a outline several chapters ahead and then not follow it. And I often have the basis of the story in mind, but the specifics I do not. And if I hadn't had so much experience in all of these crazy places, and I've got 200 novels to write, and somehow I don't think I'm going to make it. And so there's tons of experience out there, and I'm just trying to get it down on paper or into a digitized form. So I I I do not utilize a full outline at all.
Hmm. Sasha wanted to know about the book cover. She says, what does the Holy War cover say about the book, and what can readers expect kind of from seeing that cover?
That's another good question. I actually found that photo myself
Ah,
on one of the photo search outfits, and it was exactly, and then passed it on to the publisher's designing team, and it's exactly what I wanted to convey, which is that the only person who come out ahead in war are the dead. And in fact, I wrote similarly that there has never been a winner in war. No one has ever won a war, and that again, life is so short, and human life is so incredibly exciting and beautiful and deep that to throw away your life when you're 18 or 24, or to be a civilian and to be massacred innocently,
mhm.
it's just a tragedy. That's what I was trying to get, and I was trying to shock people too. To a certain extent, well, I tell the truth, and the truth sometimes is very shocking. That's what the cover means.
Teresa has a question. You had mentioned how free and wonderful Lebanon was when you were there, and then it really changed. She says, what is it like thinking about how much Lebanon and Syria changed during your time there? Like, what kind of emotions were you going through?
Well, it's. I mean, if you know a place well and you love it, to lose it is
Hmm.
like losing a loved one. And
Yeah.
basically, everything that was beautiful about that city got destroyed, and the insanity of the battles that it there were everybody was killing everybody. I mean, there would be different. There were the Shias, the Sunnis, the Christians, the Palestinians, all kinds of other smaller clans, and everybody was shooting and basically shelling. The shelling that would go on, and you wouldn't even know where the shells came from. It could be
Yeah.
anybody could be shelling you, and so every place beautiful got destroyed. Every single place. There wasn't one surviving beautiful or historic place left in the entire city, and in fact, in much of Lebanon.
Oh, wow.
So it really changed, and it's like losing a loved one. It's
Yeah.
because what happens with these old stone buildings is all the lives that have lived there. When you live there, they're there with you. They're there
Hmm.
in your bones. And when the place gets destroyed, all these lives no longer have a way to touch us anymore. So it's
Right.
it's absolutely tragic, and that's of course what's going on in Syria now, and of course in Iraq, and what happened in
Yeah.
Afghanistan. It just goes on and on and on.
It's horrible. Um, we have a question about reading your reviews and some critics. Jerry says you've been described as the 21st century's most exciting authors by the Washington Times, which is very agree. He says, what's it like knowing critics and readers love your book? Do you ever feel pressure to live up to that description?
No, you, what you write for as a writer is so deep and so much. I keep using the words in your bones.
Hmm.
That I learned long ago uh, to drive at what's inside and what I'm trying to say. And on the other hand, it's extremely heartening to know that I've reached people, uh, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to reach my readers. I'm trying to form a personal connection with every single reader. One reviewer just the other day said it's like sitting down around the fire with me and a glass of wine.
Hmm.
I try to give that personal connection, and so I don't mind all the good reviews. I've had a few nasty ones too. People that don't like all the people who don't like sex. People who don't like sex tend to get very bent out of shape about some of my books
Hmm.
because there's a lot of sex in my books. Because there's a lot of sex in life, thank God. Where would we be without that,
Right.
huh?
Nowhere. Nobody.
Yeah.
Ashley wants to know, do you think your writing has evolved since you first started writing books, and is there one particular difference that you see?
Yeah, another great question. Yeah, I just happened to be re-editing my first novel, which is coming out again, being reissued. And I was a lot more wordy back then. Um, I knew more words. As you get older, you forget all of these really bizarre words like lanceolate, and I think I've gotten much simpler in my writing style over the years and gotten. There's a writer who has enormously influenced me is Irina Nemirovsky. She was a Russian Jew who grew up. Well, she grew up in the Ukraine and then had to leave Russia and go to France after the Russian Revolution. And she wrote a series of masterpieces, which most of which have not been translated yet into English. And she finally was taken to be killed at Auschwitz. But her clean writing style, the French have influenced me very much. I read a lot of French literature, and my
Yeah.
first and most important influence was Hemingway, of course. Hemingway can distill an entire lifetime into a single sentence, which is remarkable. So yes, I have become simpler. I've also picked up tempo. My books tend to be more exciting and faster than they were. And I've also changed my ideas about a lot of stuff, so those idea changes coming through as well.
Mhm.
It's a good question.
Excellent. Yeah. I was wondering, do you have any writers that you look to for advice? Now that you have some books out, you talk to some more writers than you probably did beforehand. Is there anyone you go to for advice, or just just to
I
kind of?
didn't get all of that because my computer cut out for a second. Were you basically
Oh, no
asking
problem.
what writers
Yeah,
are most important to me?
do you go to any writers that you know for advice, writing advice, anything? Is there anyone that you
No,
look to? No.
no,
So you're
no.
just
I don't believe in creative writing classes, and I don't believe in any of that. I think writing is a very solitary pastime, and
hmm
I mean, I certainly take very seriously the views of my readers. A lot of people contact me on my website and have questions and sometimes critiques, and I listen very carefully to those critiques. But
hmm
as for other writers, I think that's a great way to disperse the intensity of what you're trying to do is to share it with other people. You got to
Right.
you got to go. It's like running the marathon. You don't want to stop and talk to folks along the way.
That's true. I never thought of it that
Only if
way.
you have to. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Um, Jackie wants to know which character in Holy War do you relate to the most and the least?
I lost it again. This darn computer of mine. I'm going to take it outside and shoot it. You said, what did you say
Um,
again, please?
I said, which character in Holy War do you relate to the most, and which one do you relate to the least in
Um,
Holy War?
in Holy War, the character that's closest to me
Yes.
is the French commando André, uh,
hmm
and most like my own background. Even though one of the other characters, the spy for British intelligence, is actually an American journalist, and I certainly have been an American journalist, but
hmm
the one whose approach to life and is most like mine, and it's very interesting that in the book at one point he gets caught in a bombed out cellar, which used to happen a lot, and then another bomb hits it, and the cellar, everything comes down on top of the cellar, and you're pinned in either for the rest of your life, which is until you die of thirst, or you're crushed, or oftentimes they manage to get you out. And so he goes through that, and that's where he meets the woman that he falls in love with for the first time in his life. So he's the one I probably appreciate the most, and I really don't have a character that I don't appreciate. I've got some characters that are a little bit snarly. I mean, I've got a Hezbollah terrorist leader, and in the book he starts to fall in love with the idea of peace, and so I can understand where he came from. I mean, it's easy for us to say, gee whiz, how could you be a Hezbollah leader? But when you grow up in that situation, and we've sinned against the Muslim people in many different ways and could have encouraged a lot of that kind of behavior. And the other character that I could be negative about is Rosa, the Palestinian guerrilla. But again, I understand where she's coming from. And she's extremely sensual and outgoing, and she goes through half of the men in Beirut, leaving them deaf, dumb, and blind. And I certainly appreciate that in a woman. So even the most embattled and negative people, there's roots to that. And what I try to do is explore those roots without. I don't take sides. I like everybody to have his or her right to speak.
Right. Angie has a question. She says, what is the most adventurous thing you've done in the last 6 weeks?
What is what I've done in the last 6 weeks?
The most adventurous thing that you've done in the last 6 weeks.
Well, I just had shoulder surgery 11 weeks ago, so I'm still a semi-cripple, which has completely interfered with mountain climbing, long distance swimming, kayaking, anything. But a couple of things, but nothing that's printable. And but if we go back to the first of the year, I would say some goofy mountaineering stunts would probably be the most adventurous. And that's how both of my shoulders are very badly injured, and they both came from different mountaineering falls. So you can see that I don't have the brains of a termite. So I don't learn from experience one bit. So I would say up in the mountains is probably the most adventurous I've done in the last year before I had my shoulder surgery.
Fair enough. Sounds fantastic. Savvy Bookworm has a question. They say, do you plan to write any nonfiction books in the future? Have you ever wanted to do that?
Yeah, I've got a book outlined on wolves. I'm very much involved with wolves and the preservation of wolves. And I actually co-wrote the state of Colorado's wolf management plan, which says that no wolf can be disturbed unless it's seriously harming livestock. So I'm writing a nonfiction book on wolves because they're so remarkable. There's a lot of thought that by anthropologists that in essence we learned family values from wolves because we're the only primate that's monogamous except for the gibbon. Anyway, wolves are my passion, and I'm trying to find time to write that book.
That's amazing.
And I must say, one other thing I must say, Amanda, too, is that wolves are suffering tragically right now because of President Obama's war on wolves, which is it's the worst killing of wolves in the last 100 years. So I'm trying to deal with that too in the book.
Are you doing any events or any sort of like fun supports with the wolf project? Anything? Or are you waiting until the book comes out?
Yeah, I'm going to wait till the book comes out. I'm very much active with Defenders of Wildlife, which is the major organization. It's the best environmental organization, and I recommend it to anybody who wants a real environmental organization instead of a money-seeking nonprofit. The Sierra Club being the worst. So anyway, I work a lot with Defenders of Wildlife and with many other environmental organizations, from saving the wolves to saving the elephants, to even from the bees and the bats and the birds, which is why I'm opposed to wind power, because of what it does to bees and birds and bats, etc., and does no good. So anyway, that's my thoughts on
that. Excellent. Teresa has a really great question. She says, you have said that as a war correspondent, you tried to understand the question, why do we war? She says, have you found the answer to this question?
Why do we war? It's really the only two consistent activities of human beings are sex and killing each other. So on one hand, we're making human beings. On the other hand, we're getting rid of them. And no matter how far
Right.
you go back, even to our early primate days when we came down out of the trees, we started going after each other at a great rate. I think it's in religion is the major cause of war, but anything can be an invasion. Somebody's annoyed at somebody's neighbor. It doesn't take much to start a war. It's just ingrained in our DNA, and however, we have to evolve beyond war, or we're not going to make it much longer as a species. In fact, the Earth isn't going to make it much longer as a site of advanced life. So we have made progress. When you look at the 12th century, the 15th century, even the 18th century, the
Hmm.
there were far more smaller wars as well as lots of large ones. If we can get beyond that most of Europe and even Russia, despite the latest Ukraine fiasco, has gotten beyond war. The United States is, from the point of view of the number of wars in the last 200 years, the United States is by far the world leader as having had the most wars and
Yeah.
instituted the most wars. So I think any criticisms that we have about war need to start at home. But I don't, to be honest, I cannot give a final reason why we war. I just
Yeah.
know, and one of the reasons I wrote Holy War was that if I could take all my readers right there, right into that war, so that they were there, terrified, happy, in love, all of the various things that happen in war, that
Hmm.
it might help change to a more peaceful world. Because a lot of the things that happen in this world happen because we don't understand, or because we
Right.
don't listen to history. And if we can listen to history, we can maybe be better human beings.
Excellent. Um, Cynthia has a very interesting question. Are there any of your books that you would like to have written differently once they have been released?
That's a dynamite question. I've never thought of that question before. But, and the answer is no. They're like children. Books are like children.
Yeah.
And how can you ever say that you wish one of your kids was different? Children are such a gift that, well, I mean, as long as they're not unhealthy in some tragic way.
Hmm.
Uh, so it, and a book is a record not only of where the writer is at the time, but also where the culture is at the time and where readers are at the time. Because a book is just nothing but a story that's shared between people. And so yeah, I leave my books alone. All of my back novels are coming out again now,
Yeah.
and getting enormous success. But I don't mess with them. I leave them, except if the only thing that I would change is typos and stuff like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Speaking of some of your past novels, Jake wants to know what type of research, if any, went into this novel and your other novels, House of Jaguar and Saving Paradise.
Um, Usually I write from my own personal experience, and as
Right.
I think I said once before in our chat that if I haven't been there, if I haven't seen it or something almost exactly like it, and if I haven't
Hmm.
been involved in it, I don't write about it. So most of
Right.
my research is not really research. It's just my experience. I'm writing about my own
Right.
experience, and as I said earlier, I've got like 200 books to write. So when you
Hmm.
go through all that stuff overseas and all these nasty places, you get lots of stories. But
Yes.
occasionally I'll go back and look at a map to see if I've forgotten the name of a street or something like that. And
Hmm.
occasionally I'll take a deeper glance at the politics and the historical politics of a place to make sure I understand the background. But usually my stories are just straight out of life.
Yeah. It's interesting how much we remember, you know. Um,
Well, the thing is, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
no, no,
I
no, go
was
ahead.
just going to, I was just going to say the thing is about deep experiences, you don't forget it. I mean, when you
Hmm.
think you're going to be shot, you don't forget it. It's not like
Yeah.
going to the pharmacy, And so these most I write most of what I write about is extremely deep experience, whether it's love or fear or hatred or joy and the beauty of the natural world. I write a lot about the beauty of the natural world, which unfortunately is going fast.
Hmm.
But I don't have any trouble remembering. In fact, that there's a lot of things I'd like to forget.
Yeah. Samantha has a question. She says, "What is something you hope your readers can take away about war from reading this book?"
How futile it is, Futile, not feudal as in the feudalism. War is futile. There's no such thing as a winner in war. Uh, if
Hmm.
if if we go to war and we lose the life of one young person, it's not worth it.
Right.
And and I mean Iraq too. GW's little war that he instituted for no reason whatsoever, except he felt he wasn't a man, which of course he wasn't. Um, I mean, when you look at what that's done and killed 4,000 Americans and crippled for life another 20 to 30,000, some of who are quadriplegic and are going to spend the rest of their lives in bed, as well led to the
Yeah.
deaths of 1.5 million Iraqis. Uh, that kind of thing is what I want to pass on to everyone. That war, it's like it's so insane, and yet everybody loves to do it. So we got to get out of the habit of loving war, and or eventually, as we've said, we're going to go under.
Not to mention all of the psychological effects of the
Oh my
soldiers.
God. Well, PTSD is, and
Hmm.
every people have been having PTSD since the first war. Just now we have a
Yeah,
title for it.
exactly. Nobody knew how to handle it, and they don't seem to have a grasp on it either now. So, um, we have an interesting question from Lana. She says, when you're writing, do you listen to music or do you any type of creative ritual to kind of keep the creativity flowing?
Sometimes I listen to music. I'm a heavy metal fan, and I
Nice.
like the Stones, and I play rock guitar. So AC/DC is by far my favorite, and I've written a whole book. I wrote a whole book listening to one CD of Eric Clapton, and
Oh,
over again. And so yeah, I do. And I like to start my day by reading a French newspaper, and that gets my brain in gear, and off I go. But yeah, I certainly music is a wonderful. It opens up the
yeah.
mind. It opens up the gates of perception, and yeah, I love it.
Excellent. Cody wants to know, are you reading anything currently? Any books that you're
Oh
reading?
yeah, yeah. I usually end up reading like 5 or 6 books at a time, some of which are
Oh, wow.
nonfiction. Excuse me. So I'm reading a book, When the World Was Lit Only by Fire by William Manchester, who was the biographer of the Kennedys and a professor of history. Wonderful book. And I'm about to start reading Jerusalem, Jerusalem, which is the history of Jerusalem from the very early stages up to now. And it's a history of constant warfare. I'm also reading, I'm reading Simenon, Georges Simenon, who's a French they call him a detective novelist, but he's a master of literature. God, I'm reading Look Homeward Angel by Thomas Wolfe, and I'm reading one other, oh, and I'm reading a Virginia Woolf novel right now. Interesting, I'm reading two Woolf novels. Virginia and Thomas, of course, are not even the same culture. But yeah, I read constantly, and I also read a lot of science stuff and medical journals,
Oh,
just to
excellent.
give, to keep me my mind busy. I just love medicine and science. Excuse me.
Excellent suggestions. You guys have some good book picks you can go read now. Is there anything else you're working on? Any projects that we should know about or any other books? We know the
Yeah, I'm
wolf
writing.
things in action.
I'm writing a second book in the series about Pono Hawkins, the Hawaiian surfer and former special forces guy in Afghanistan and Iraq. And
Awesome.
his first one was Saving Paradise, which was based on an actual situation in Hawaii. And I'm now writing a follow-up. I'm going to write more Pono Hawkins books, and I'm working as well on finishing up two other books, one on Iraq, Afghanistan, and
Hmm.
the 30 years of American covert war, and another one on the 60s, being in a rock band and protest movement in the 60s, as well as being in Vietnam. So,
That sounds amazing.
yeah, and I'm also fighting windmills. I'm also working with other environmentalists trying to stop this plague of windmills creeping across, in the case of Maine, covering all the beautiful mountains of Maine with these hideous things that don't do anything for global warming, but make the politicians and the business people rich. So, yeah, I do too much, but I'm taking off.
You are.
Very shortly, in a couple of days, my wife and I are going to go and hike across England from one side to the other, which is fun.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, 14 days.
So you're super busy.
Well, it's
You're
going to
staying
rain
very
all the
busy.
time.
Yeah,
Rain all the
it's
time.
beautiful.
Yeah.
It's
It
beautiful
always
there, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Absolutely. Yeah.
I love Ireland and England. Beautiful places. So we've gotten to the end of our questions, but I just wanted to thank you again for joining us. It was fantastic to have you here today.
Well, I very much appreciate the invitation, Amanda. Thank you very much. And I certainly thank Merrill Moss Media Relations and everyone out there and
Thank you so
Bookshelf.
much.
And I wish everyone well. And please, if anyone has any questions or suggestions regarding my work, just go on my contact page on mikebarnbooks.com and send me an email, and I'll get right back to you, because I really care. I really like to stay in touch with people who are reading my books.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you so much. And everyone, don't forget to stop by BookTrib. We have hard copy books for giveaway. We're also doing the Book Show promo, so check it out. You can text Holy War to 67076. And once again, thank you so much, Mike.
Thank
Have a great
you,
time
Amanda.
in England.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you. Best wishes to everyone. Goodbye.